Well, now we're joined with Carol Diaso. And Carol, you are the spouse of one of the clients here at Moving with Hope.
Yes, I am.
And so if you can tell, maybe if you want to talk about either yourself or just or your spouse about how they came to hear about Moving with Hope, and then maybe what they've gained and some of the things that you've actually benefited from here.
Sure. My husband had a malignant brain tumor 21 years ago.
Okay.
And they gave him 2 years to live. And he was doing pretty well. Electrical engineer, though, couldn't do his job. So, he's basically disabled.
Okay.
And he was pretty mobile and pretty independent up until about 7 years ago.
Okay.
And he had some kind of a burp, and he got up one day and he couldn't walk, and he couldn't get himself up, and wound up being rehabilitated at Gaylord in Wallingford.
Okay.
And so he spent 3 months there, and when he came out of there, he came home to physical therapy, 3 times a week, an hour a day, occupational therapy, as well as some speech therapy.
Okay.
And once he reached a certain plateau, they were like, okay, Dave, bye-bye, we'll see you later. We're not paying for it. We're not going to provide you with these services any longer. And there we were.
Was he already on like Social Security, Disability, Medicare, or was he on the your own insurance? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So and had both, but so it was frustrating for me. I worked full time, and I was like, I need to bring him somewhere. He needs to exercise, but yet he didn't have it in himself to really do it on his own when he was at home.
Right. He did prior to that episode, but now not. Okay.
So being a salesperson, selling advertising, I tend to walk into people's places of business.
Sure.
And I walked into Tad's place of business just to find out what he did, and not long after that, I brought David for the first time, and it was probably November of, I don't know, maybe 2009, I want to say. And he came a couple times, and it was kind of difficult for me to get him here because I worked full time.
Okay.
And then he had a seizure, and we kind of dropped it, and that's what happened. However, I took an early retirement from my job last year, and in June of 2012, started bringing David here on a regular basis.
Full time, basically.
So he comes 3 days a week, and he brings his lunch, and everybody makes fun of him because he's the food guy.
Oh, okay. He loves his lunch. And Carol makes lovely lunches.
I was going to say, like, for example,
gourmet.
What does he have?
Oh, sometimes we have tuna with roasted vegetables and a little couscous or something like that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so we try to keep it healthy
That's good.
for the most part. So I get him to see how much every once in a while I treat him. But
now, the early retirement you took, was that to do this, or were you?
No, it was kind of forced to do that. So, but it all seemed circumstances happened last year, and it actually was a godsend for me to have the time off.
That's why I was wondering if you deliberately did that or not. So,
No, it wasn't deliberate, but it was a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, David's been coming here. He's stronger. He likes the socialization with these guys.
Speaking of which, what sort of things do you do that would you characterize as just sort of social activities rather than physical activities?
Just 3 or 4 guys, a couple of girls getting around the table, and they just talk about the day's events, and they make kind of cavalier comments about each other.
It's not card playing or there's
we have plans, and we did this week. We're going to actually start a bowling tournament using Wii gaming. With the Wii gaming, and we want Dave to compete against people, and we'll see what happens. But there's
he can cater it, right?
He can cater the events, but and the game is very important. But it's like
you'll be waiting for him to wind up very slowly.
But it's good for Dave's brain. He's had a brain injury.
Of course,
a couple of things that we do with him on the activity side of the program is just for him to hit a ball like he's boxing, eye-hand coordination, laying on his back to bring a ball from his feet to his knees to his hands, over his hands. That planning, that motor planning.
That actually was making me think too. How do you gauge or how do you track people's progress? In other words, do you take? I mean, like if you just treat this as a regular gym, I come to the gym, okay, I did 10 sit-ups, I did 10 pullovers at this amount of weight. Tomorrow, maybe I'll try 11. Do you track people's physical capabilities?
Every person gets an evaluation by me. The evaluation really looks at range of motion, left-right-sided muscle imbalances, weaknesses obviously affected by a brain injury or a spinal cord injury, Parkinson's, whatever's going on, MS. Leg length difference, any rotational issues in the hip, range of motion problems that'll affect mobility. So you're really looking at functional movement, functional health.
Okay.
And once that evaluation is done, then I prescribe a corrective plan of action, a prescription. And that prescription is flexible because there's going to be some intervening variables that even on the first evaluation are not going to come up. So then you're going to have some tissue problems. You're going to have some mild to moderate pain that you have to kind of overcome with people to get them to get to a full range of motion. So basically it's troubleshooting for the first month or so, and then it's basically just challenging them with different lead-ups. In other words, when David first came here, it was walking behind a wheelchair. Then and using a lot of auditory and tactile cues, tapping the legs, verbal cues, getting them to move, getting to respond, getting them to learn movements. Then it was putting them in a harness behind the wheelchair to make it more challenging for him, to unload him. The harness will make David weigh like 30 pounds less.
Oh, okay.
So then he can move better. He can ambulate more rapidly. He can't
That actually
fall.
makes me think about like aquatic type of rehab. Obviously, I don't think you have a pool here. Are there any thoughts of that, or
Well, again, I mean, I like weight-bearing activity. I would never discount the value of aquatic therapy, but when you take a person in the water, they're always going to feel better.
Right.
But the real world is dry land. So a lot of people that have a lot of pain, a lot of people that have a lot of discomfort, a lot of orthopedic intolerance, they'll go into a pool, but they'll never improve on dry land.
I understand.
So if you don't work out in gravity, and challenge your ability to take risks of falling and having the harness there to protect you from falling, you're not going to progress rapidly. You really aren't. In fact, you may fail because in water you have a tendency to lose lean tissue. We're not talking about swimming in the water.
I understand. I know what you're talking about.
We're talking about walking in the water.
Right.
You only weigh 12 to 15 pounds in the water. But so you have lead-ups. You push people through stages, challenging them once they can finish a basic step. It was very difficult for her husband to sit down on a treatment table and lay down on his back. Now that's a piece of cake. Now we get him to sit down and lay on his stomach and do things like planks, hip extensions. So we're getting it. He's doing progressively more complicated tasks as he stays here longer, and that transforms into much easier activity, which is activities of daily living.
Right.
Walking, going up and down stairs. I have people do repeated bouts. David comes in, he does 20 minutes on this, he comes back, he does the snack. Then he does the upper cycle, he does the leg press, he has some water, has another snack.
Right.
He's tired. Take a break. He's really not tired. That's part of his brain injury. But give the guy a break.
Right.
Okay, now he's been here 2 hours. He would have gone an hour and a half earlier in PT.
Right.
Done.
Right.
And the thing is, since I'm not licensed and I don't have any insurance companies telling me what to do, David never gets discharged. He can stay and continually progress. Then he does his boxing. Then he does...
So in a way, it's sort of like a perennial, rehab, health club, or a perennial rehab, like center, fitness center, where they can go.
It's a gym for somebody who
exactly.
has
And that's why I call it rehability.
Yeah.
Life Design's rehability. I'm
good.
giving people new ability that they never had before. And they never will get unless they have an environment that's conducive to 2 to 3 hours without saying, next,
Sure.
when you're doing PT, you've got a huge nut to crack. 55 to 60% of your gross is your salary. Unfortunately, 10% is your rent because you're paying for $30 a square foot triple net. Here I'm paying $6 a square foot. I'm in a downtown 160-year-old warehouse.
Right.
This is where my product has to be sold. You can't. If I had to go into the Cinto Towers, you'd have to pay. Oh my God! You have to pay $10,000-$15,000 a year to do what I do for $3,000 or $4,000 a year. And even then, I think that's too expensive.
Now, the other thing I was thinking of is, you obviously are able to do all these things. You can be basically more patient, more therapeutic, and give people that real opportunity. But on the flip side, how is it controlled from a liability standpoint from the patients? For example, let's say something happens. Let's say they take a risk. They try to walk and maybe it doesn't work out, and they actually regress in their rehab or something. What's if you're not part of a hospital healthcare system, what's their recourse if something were like that happen?
It's voluntary. They're here. They've basically been discharged from licensed care, and they're here on a voluntary basis. Nothing can happen. And not to be too silly about it, but they move too slow to get hurt. If they fall, they're not going to fall. They're going to collapse and fold to the ground.
I understand what you're saying.
And if they're in a harness, they're not going to fall at all. So there is absolutely no. I've never had a single injury in 29 years, period.
Okay. Speaks for itself. Right
just
there.
hadn't had. I mean, because you just that's the reason why people pay more too, is because we're always close.
Right.
You're standing close. We've had a couple people fall because they got, clumsy with their feet or whatever, and you're just there in time to grab their shirt, because you're 3 or 4 feet away.
Right.
And that's another sad reason why people have to pay more, because they're slow and they have a risk of falling. So that's, again, to get them better, you have to challenge them, but you have to dedicate people to them that are on the lower wage scale, but you still got to pay that person. Mm-hmm. So if I'm paying a person $12 to $15 an hour, as a business owner, I know I have to at least make $30 an hour, double. Right. So who can afford $30 an hour 3 days a week, year round? Mm-hmm. Again, the cost benefit or the return on investment in terms of our society is enormous. We know that doing research. I feel that it's important as we move forward to have regional funding established. And I'm working on a proposal with that with our mayors and with our local representatives and senators and with our congressmen. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as we get more involved with understanding my proposal, these programs should be free. Mm-hmm. They should be absolutely free, to the extent where, yes, you have to pay $30 a month or $60 a month, but not $500 a month. Right. Because if I'm getting people who have disabilities and chronic illnesses from re-entering at a higher level of admission costs to a hospital, time after time after time again, one hospital admission is $50,000. Mm-hmm. A fall with a fractured femur is $50,000 to $100,000. If I can prevent one fall, so because we've gotten to a point in our culture where the norm is chronic illness, mm-hmm. we no longer can expect insurance companies to pay for it. You can't. So it has to be regionalized. It has to be local, so that every dollar we collect goes to that person's care. Right. And the care is being given by people that are not making $80 an hour or $150, which is what my wife has to be paid or a doctor has to be paid. Right. She doesn't make $80. Right. But for her to be there and her staff surrounding
and her benefits and things like that,
it's $80 an hour. Exactly. Doctor's going to be $200 an hour. How can you treat 40,000 people in the valley with a salary of $120 an hour? Right. You can't. So you have to have it. You have to have a different model. You have to have a different paradigm and a different model that is working. I'm working. I've been doing this a long time. Right. It works. But we need a funding source, and we need support at all different levels, whether it's regional support through some sort of, I propose a $250,000 increase on every household in the valley. That would raise $6 million overnight. A $250,000 increase would raise $6 to $8 million, and that money would be controlled by the Department of Public Health, and then would be sent down as it was billed. In other words, when a person came in to see me, they would qualify. I would send a bill for services just like insurance. Right, right. And that money would be used to pay for that person to be here. Mm-hmm. That person would also have to pay something out of their own pocket based on a sliding scale of need. Mm-hmm. We're just, again, limited resources, limited time, focusing really on things we can see direct results from. I mean, I'm just so pleased that Julie Penry has offered to help us out through Shelton Youth Services, and she's going to handpick 20 or 30 families in the next week or so that have issues in their family environment that we can serve, whether it's activity, weight loss, weight management, just play and having fun, and getting scholarships for those kids, so when they come to our programs this summer, they won't have to pay but maybe $1 or $2 a visit versus the cost of $9 to $14 a visit for a professionally run program.
And if you were to look at the demographics of, first of all, the clients, the people who come in with disabilities that you help improve, Are they from Shelton only, the Valley, Stratford? You know, where it was all over?
I would say 60%, 70% Shelton, 20% Derby, and 10% everywhere else.
Okay.
Seymour, Oxford, Stratford, Trumbull, Monroe,
Okay.
Orange, Woodbridge.
Oh wow. Okay.
We've had people come from Waterbury. We've had a person come from Danbury who took a train every morning and came to us because we were able to help them walk more effectively. So they took the single train that went from Danbury to connected in Norwalk, which went to Bridgeport, which came to Derby, and then he had a friend pick him up at the Derby train station and bring him to us.
Oh wow.
And by the time he got on the train at 7:30 and got here at 9, he stayed here till 1, and there was only one train leaving exactly at like 1:45.
Yeah.
Back he went to Danbury. But you know, I have people that want to come here as far away as Lyme. I got a Channel 8 Action News did a 2-minute bid on me last summer.
Okay.
And I had people calling me from all over the state of Connecticut because they are wanting, you know, their loved ones to get out of convalescent homes, have the ability to walk again. The public health model is every single person that leaves here becomes a champion. They then go out and they slowly begin to change the cultural norm, the expectation. John was always overweight. He never gave 2 bits about his diabetes. What happened to John? He's lost all that weight. He's in good control of his diabetes. He's out walking every morning. He becomes a champion.
Sure.
He then changes the behavior of his neighborhood. And that's how you take one John and make him 100 Johns. And that's a public health model.
Right, right.
So the goal is to penetrate 5% of all the people in the valley in a 10-year period. You penetrate 5% of the people, you're going to have a massive shift in human behavior. You got to do it. So that's the goal.
And as far as your husband goes, would you say he could fall into that category of being a champion, either if not now, maybe at some point?
Absolutely. I mean, I know he's definitely stronger. For a guy who couldn't, he'd fall down and he couldn't get himself up.
Right, right.
Now Tad has worked with him, and you still have to prod him a little bit, but he can get up on his knees and hold on to something.
So physically he's capable. Maybe it's just an anxiety of I don't know.
Well, it's and he has he had a brain tumor, so that's definitely
sure. Again, whatever part of his brain is there can learn to pick up information more rapidly and get it to go out more rapidly, so that it's all about response time. The more it's called neuroplasticity. Basically, the more you train the brain, the more it bends and twists and becomes resilient.
Absolutely.
So David is finding other pathways to get information that's going in. I mean, I'm pretty certain that Dave understands everything we say on the way in. It's just on the way out it gets lost. So by constantly stimulating him, he's finding new pathways to get Dave get up. Gets up. I mean, the other day, not every day, but the other day, I literally told Dave to get up and sit down on the couch or the table. He got up, he put one arm down, he sat on his butt, and he laid on his back. Then when he got done, I said, Dave, I want you to get up and stand up. He did it.
Right.
Now that's one time he did it perfectly. That means if the more you do it, he'll do it again. And he'll do it again, and he'll do it again. It just so happened that day everything was together. It was meds. Obviously you're also dealing with complicated medication for seizures and things of that nature. But again, with more work, people can improve the quality of their life, and it's the name of the game.
And the other thing I was thinking of, there's disabled, sort of chronic or permanent. Let's say somebody, for example, just had a hip or a knee replacement, or some sort of surgery that was voluntary. Well, I guess they're healthy otherwise, and they're not progressing to the point of what you raised with your clients. They are not progressing in their traditional rehab quick enough.
Right.
Either because of physically they can't go to where they think they should, where the hospital says they should be, or because of anxiety. Let's say they know they can physically, but they're just afraid every day. Would that type of client be eligible, or would you take them in here?
That's over half our clients.
Really?
Orthopedic intolerance.
Okay. I see. When you said that, I was thinking orthopedic from a chronic disability point of view, not
strictly orthopedic. People that have the typical client here is a 78 to 80-year-old male-female with spinal stenosis, scheduled or already had a total hip.
Okay.
Has because of 5 to 7 years of accommodation or compromising
Right.
their gait. They
Right.
now have a problem with one knee and a foot, which causes hip and back pain.
Sure.
So they have arthritic pain,
Right.
they have muscular pain,
Right.
and they have muscle imbalance, all happening at the same time. And they also have, obviously, high blood pressure, high cholesterol,
Right, right.
and have gained weight, which everybody in
Yeah.
this culture has. So they come to me with 5 or 6 comorbidities, and their only goal, like one gentleman that's out there right now, their only goal is to go to a trip to Poland. And to go to Poland, that husband has to be able to walk 1,200 to 1,500 feet without having to sit down. All right, so that's the goal. That's my prescription. How am I going to get him who can only walk 50 feet?
How far is that? Like, is that like?
That would be 8 times around our track.
Oh, okay.
That's what he does. He does his work with rollators, canes, no assisted devices. He does
Right.
work in the harness. So the idea is, my goal from a physiology standpoint, from an applied physiology standpoint, is how am I going to get him to walk 1,800 feet?
Right. Right.
He can only walk 50 feet without buckling. So then you have to think about that. And I'm in a unique position because I'm looking out a year. That's called a mesocycle.
Right.
A PT's looking out 12 to 16 weeks, you're done.
Exactly.
And so I'm looking out a year ahead as to where I want him to be, and I have to put him on a plan of transitional exercise prescription
Right.
after therapy, because he doesn't qualify for therapy because he doesn't want to fall. The only way he's going to get therapy is if he falls, enters the hospital.
Right.
Okay, so he doesn't want therapy because he doesn't want to fall to get it.
Right. Right. I understand.
You've got to have a trauma to get therapy.
It's like the whole job experience thing. It's an oxymoronic thing. You know, I can't get a job without
So he wants to
experience because I can't get a job.
He wants to get well. He wants to get well, and I'm the only guy on the block.
Yeah.
And so he's getting better toward that goal. I mean, he's
What's
up.
nice too is you're actually acting as sort of both a physical and occupational therapist, because you're doing sort of the physical, what he has to do, but keeping in mind a sort of that's not daily living. It's a temporary or finite vacation living, where he wants to be. But it's a real world application to what
The
he's
real
doing
world
physically.
application. He now he was able last week to order a dumpster and actually fill it. He was able to stand long enough and carry things long enough to go from garage to dumpster.
Okay.
And repeat it to actually partially load the dumpster. Whereas,
Right.
6 months ago when he started in January, he couldn't walk 50 feet with anything. Okay, he had to have a cane.
Right.
Now he can walk without a cane
Wow.
to a
And
dumpster
carrying things.
and throw the stuff in a dumpster.
Wow.
Okay, so that's functional training. It's not physical therapy. It's functional movement science. I mean, my background really is in movement science, understanding how people move, why they don't move, what physiological system is being compromised, what energy level is being compromised, and then implement a strategy to basically grow that energy system,
Right.
balance, strength, power, whatever. Doesn't look that difficult, what I'm doing. That's what that makes it nice. People don't realize what I'm doing to them. I'm thinking all the time.
Oh, that's
My
good.
dad was an engineer,
Oh yeah, what kind of engineer?
industrial engineer.
Okay.
He was an industrial engineer for 42 years. Was the inventor of I would say the industrial engineering process that transformed Pratt & Whitney aircraft from a military company
Right.
to a commercial airplane company.
Okay.
He devised a way to build engines fast enough and with high enough quality to make it a commercial company. That was his job. And so he was the guy that kind of developed that concept, made him a very successful
yeah.
company.
I mean, it's interesting. My dad was not an engineer per se. Went to Hunter College in New York City, took every science and math course that he could. But he imparted on me the importance of being, because he was in sales, basically had his own business, and I've always been more of the sales marketing type of engineer as an engineer versus the stereotypical
Tables engineer or whatever.
Exactly, and yet, because here we are both very people oriented, but he said, what you're going to find is, and I can see it here, you got a lot of emotional things you're dealing with. You're dealing with people who are afraid, anxiety, or just, maybe get angry at themselves. I mean, there's all these people issues, yet if you're an engineer while you're doing it, there is a part of you that can really separate it out. Say, look, well, here's the data. Yesterday you got up from the table, so that's one data point. Today, let's see if we can do that. Oh, okay, you didn't, so now it goes here. You know what I mean? Then you're tracking, and like you said, you're looking down the road, which is the same way as, you're trying to gauge where you're going to be on the graph, 5 years from now.
Right.
So it's that whole ability to stay sort of scientific and technical, while still being obviously you're a compassionate human being.
Very social,
exactly.
laid back.
So to me, that's the ideal person, because you can be very compassionate, but if you don't see the data at the same time, then you might get wrapped up in the emotions.
Yeah, and there's also, you ask about intervening variables. When people don't perform the same way, what did you do yesterday? What did you do 5 days ago?
Right.
Did you, this one woman who's very frail, she's had a total hip, and she's got problems with her back, blah, blah, blah. She had taken upon herself to do repetitive weekend after weekend after weekend of cleaning the attic. And basically the conclusion, it wasn't rocket science, it's just, you can't do that anymore. You don't have the physical capacity of doing that, and you're ripping apart your lower back and your right shoulder.
Right.
So you have to delay that until the fall, until we develop something where you can get stronger, and we're going to do it functionally. Show me the exact position you're in when you're cleaning your attic.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so she's in the exact positions of a cleaning attic, and that's where we train her.
Right.
So the muscles that she uses to clean the attic are being trained. You're not going to the gym, doing the high pulley, the bench press, and walking on the treadmill.
Right.
This is functional conditioning.
Oh, that's good.
So that's what my background, applied physiology. Taking physiology, which is structure and function knowledge, and applying it to the real world. So it's functional, it makes sense, and the person's happy. I went out and I played golf the other day, and I didn't have back pain, or I could walk up that hill sideways.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing about the data. You can use that, here before we were talking about, positive versus negative. You could, even I was just realizing when I was saying, well, you did that yesterday is almost very negative. It's like, come on,
what's the matter with you?
Right. but yet you can say, look, oh wow, you were able to do this yesterday. There, so of course you'll do it today. You can spin it with your tone, with your, by still using that same data point or that same science that you had, like you said, not only what they've done, what you know to be true about how the body works. You're like, you might explain, look, when you lift your arm, the reason that is because this muscle pulls here or whatever. Depending on what their cognitive ability, you might be able to explain to them exactly what's going on a very fundamental basis versus maybe where it's been compromised, and then how you get it back to at least the goal is to hopefully get it back to where it was. But even if you're way better than you were, that's it's always positive and optimistic and looking forward.
Yeah, and the true professional for that is the physical therapist. A physical therapist had, if they had a different license, where they could do the things they were trained to do. These young people are coming out with DPTs, or at least a master's now. It's required to have a master's. Most of them are doing the extra year for the doctorate. They have so much knowledge that they simply can't use. They don't get paid more for it.
Yeah.
The company they work for does not pay them more for that knowledge. They treat the patient based on the physician prescription, and that's the end of the story. But if they could come to my office and be in my world, I've had physical therapists come here over the last 3 or 4 years because they do like a visit here to see how they're doing with Phil or Dave or Paul or Susan or whatever. And they watch me work with people and they say, God, I wish I could have a job here with you. Because I can actually see people to the end where they get better.
It's a lot of the reasons doctors go to medical school. I want to help people, right? And then all of a sudden you get into it, and it becomes all about paperwork and healthcare and reform and things like that. Things that really are not the fundamental reason.
And
that's true of a lot of jobs.
And moving people out.
And it's a shame. You're right. When you almost have created this sort of altruistic environment where this is why this is what therapy was meant to be, and come here and at least you're going to get at least hopefully why you got into it, or why you want to do this sort of thing. So that's really good.
Yeah,
that's really good. So one more time, if you can, just how people, if they're interested in either becoming a client here, or maybe volunteering, or becoming a board member, or any sort of help they want to help, they can get in touch with you. How?
Call 203-513-8424. Go to our website, movingwithhope.org, and you can contact us through the website. You can see all the wonderful things we're doing. We have some video on the website, a PowerPoint presentation of the overall mission. It's a great place to be, and we look forward to seeing anybody that we can help.
That sounds great. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Give a little time. And Carol, thank you. Good luck to you and your husband.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. Have any comments on the show? Feel free to provide feedback, questions, or suggestions to lookingupvalley@gmail.com, or check out our Facebook page and dedicated website. Thank you very much.